grown a beard at that stage. It was pre-COVID, so people were sitting close enough to one another and that kind of thing. But and even Valentine has had a bit of a facelift. The statue of St Valentine since this interview in 2019. But anyway, I'm just going to play this now. It's just a few minutes, and it'll give you a bit of a flavour, and then we'll really, for the rest of this, be coming back on some of the things that we talk about here. So hopefully, all going well, I can get this to play and you can hear it and all the rest of it. So this is just a short video.
Did you know that Dublin has a strong connection with St Valentine? In fact, you can actually visit the relics of St Valentine at Whitefriar Street Church here in the capital.
And with Valentine's Day fast approaching, Laura set out to learn more about the saint synonymous with love and romance.
The most important things to do in the world are to get something to eat, something to drink, and someone to love you. So Brendan Behan thought anyway. But as Valentine's Day approaches, are we really a nation of lovers, or have we grown a bit cynical of the whole idea of romance? With all this talk of Valentine's Day and romance, I'm intrigued to learn more about St. Valentine. Who was he, and why does he represent love?
Well, St. Valentine was a priest and then later became a bishop. And he lived in the 3rd century, in other words, the 200s.
A very long time ago.
A long time ago.
So how did Father Valentine become synonymous with love?
Well, at the time, it was a time of great turmoil and a time of war. And the emperor, the Roman emperor at the time, was Claudius II, and he was known as Claudius the Cruel. So there was actually a ban on marriage and on people who were in love getting married. So St. Valentine actually went against that ban and married people in secret. And for that reason, he was condemned to death. And in fact, he died. He was executed in the year 269 on the 14th of February, which is the feast of St. Valentine to this day.
Some of his remains are here at Whitefriar Street Church. How did that come about?
It's really all to do with a famous Carmelite priest who was based in this church, Father John Spratt, and he preached in one of the famous churches in Rome. And as a result of that, the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory XVI, as a gift, gave him the relics of St. Valentine. So the relics were brought back to Dublin and brought to this church, to Whitefriar Street Church, in 1836.
In the lead up to Valentine's Day, it's a very busy time here with plenty of people coming to visit St. Valentine.
Yes, indeed. We get lots of visitors and we get a lot of international interest, a lot of couples coming hand in hand and praying. We have a petition book at the shrine, and people often enter in their prayers and their hopes and their wishes, and just giving thanks for their love.
What a beautiful church. And so it would appear that we are a country who loves to love after all. So whoever you plan on spending this Valentine's Day, whether it's spoiling someone else or yourself, enjoy it.
Okay, so I hope you were all able to see that and hear that okay. So that just gives you a bit of a feel for the church here and the Shrine of St. Valentine and a little bit about him. So I'm just really, for the rest of this, going to expand on that in ways. And as Billy said at the start, I'm going to, if you don't mind, more or less just go ahead. I'll keep an eye on the time. Just going to go ahead with sort of presenting the stuff. A lot of it will be just visual images and that I'll talk to. And if you don't mind saving your questions to the end. So while you're listening to me, things can be occurring to you and you can keep note of them, and that you can work with the chat, as Billy said, or whatever other way you normally do. And I'm very happy to talk and take questions at the end. But if it's all right with you all, I'll just concentrate on sort of presenting this to you for a little bit anyway. So St. Valentine, who was he? Well, as we said there, he was a bishop in the 3rd century. So you're going back to, the 200s, which does mean sometimes getting facts about him can be that bit more difficult because it's such a distance of time. and he lived in a great time of turmoil in the world, really, in many ways. And so, lots of documents and things were lost. So, it can be difficult at times to put his story together. But we know a number of things about him. He was actually from Rome itself. And as we heard there, we'll talk about him a little bit more now in a minute. He was alive, Valentine was, during the reign of the Emperor Claudius II, who was known as Claudius the Cruel. And as we'll hear, one of the ways that he was cruel was in relation to forbidding people getting married, because he just wanted to put his whole effort into the war that he was raging. So we'll see that, and really that's the whole background to Valentine and why he's associated with love. And Valentine then was eventually, for his efforts, basically, he was very much standing up for people, and he was going against the marriage ban and that. And for his efforts, he eventually gets martyred. And he's martyred, St. Valentine, in Rome. Again, this is all happening in sort of the center of Rome, where he was based really all the time. It happens actually on the 14th of February in the year 269. And of course, we all know the 14th of February as Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's Day. And he gets buried in a catacomb, in one of the underground burial chambers that were common in Rome, in ancient Rome, as you'll know. So why love? Like, why is St. Valentine the patron saint of love and romance and all the rest of it? And why do so many people here, come to Whitefriar Street Church who are looking for love or who are in love, and all that? What's the reason for Valentine being the saint of love, if you like? So again, it has all to do with this Emperor Claudius II, who was Claudius the Cruel, and he was really a warmonger. He was very keen to expand the Roman Empire at the time, and he waged many bloody and nasty wars, and he was constantly needing to recruit young men to the army at the time, the Roman army. And he saw people, falling in love and getting engaged and getting married as kind of interfering and all that. So he introduced, Claudius the Cruel, introduced a ban on soldiers getting engaged and married. And St. Valentine was one of the main ones. There were one or two other colleagues of his, but he's one of the main ones who we know defied this ban, defied the emperor, and went ahead with marrying people, in secret. So that's really the main reason why St. Valentine is the patron saint of love, is because he defended love, and he defended people getting engaged and getting married, and was on the side of couples in that way. So that's really the main reason why St. Valentine is the patron saint of love. There's just some images I have, of him there. It's a bit blurred with a Roman soldier, and that's from a stained glass window, the same kind of thing. So try to give you some images that we have. Now, so that's the main reason that St. Valentine is the patron saint of love. It's because he married people in secret and defied the emperor, and then he paid the price. He eventually was thrown in jail and was killed, died a martyr's death, as we say. Now, it's interesting, there was around the time of the 14th of February and the 15th of February in Rome, there was already a kind of what you might call a pagan feast called the Festival of Lupercalia. And that was already around in the time of Valentine and that. And it used to be thought that eventually the popes decided to, replace that with St. Valentine's Day as a way of kind of countering the kind of ancient Roman pagan religion as they saw it. So what I'm saying here is that those days around what are now St. Valentine's Day, they were for a long time, even in ancient Rome, associated with a kind of a love feast. it was a bit of a weird feast in all kinds of ways, but the whole emphasis was on fertility and matchmaking. So sometimes it was thought that the Pope, particularly this Pope Gelasius, who lived in the 400s, that he kind of, emphasized St. Valentine's Day as the day on which Valentine died, and that he very much kind of brought that in to replace the pagan feast of Lupercalia. And you get a bit of that, like when we're talking about Christmas or we're talking about Halloween, people often say that there were pre-existing kind of festivals and pagan feasts and that some of these Christian feasts replaced them. So sometimes it is said that Valentine's Day kind of replaced this Roman festival of Lupercalia. But kind of nowadays, historians don't think it was as simple as that. They don't think it was as simple as the kind of popes after Valentine's death deciding to make it Valentine's Day. They think Valentine's Day more or less developed in its own way anyway, and sort of went on. And it wasn't just a simple thing of replacing the Roman festival with Valentine's Day. But anyway, it just happens, this will always be said, because Valentine's Day is 14th of February, and the fact is, in the ancient Rome, which was where Valentine grew up and where he lived and where he died, there was already this festival of matchmaking and fertility and that. So, perhaps one was replacing the other, but we don't know for sure. The growth in popularity, so here I'm trying to say again, why is St. Valentine associated with love? And I'm saying it's because of his life and what he did in defending couples who were in love and allowing them to be married and marrying them when marriage was banned. So that's the main reason. And then what happens is, particularly in some of the poets and playwrights, particularly in the English language, we find Valentine's Day becoming more and more popular and associated with love and romance. And so I have a few quotations here from a couple of poets, and particularly from Shakespeare, who mentions St. Valentine's Day a couple of times. So we find that, over the centuries, the whole theme of Valentine and love gets emphasized again and again, and often appears in literature. So this is Geoffrey Chaucer, who some of you may have met before. Geoffrey Chaucer is looked at as one of the main, you might say, father figures of poetry in the English language. He's back quite early. His dates are 1342 to 1400. And he writes in what we call Middle English, which is a slightly funny English. So you see the way the words are spelt, even here on this slide, the way St. Valentine is spelt is a little bit funny, but that's the way that English was at the time. But it's important because you can see that that Chaucer is referencing St. Valentine and very clearly saying St. Valentine is the feast of love, and St. Valentine is the patron saint of love. So all this kind of poetry, and that did a lot over the centuries to sort of, enhance the whole thing of romantic love, and there being all sorts of romance and love associated with St. Valentine. So you get this quote it's in one of his poems called The Parliament of Looks Like Fools. It's the Parliament of Fowls, meaning birds. So there's a bit of the birds and the bees here, okay? So Chaucer says in this poem, for this was sent on St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl cometh there to choose his mate. So there was a certain amount of, again, even nature at this time of the year in February, heading into spring and that, and there's a bit of the birds and the bees and that. But you have Chaucer there recalling the memory of St. Valentine as the patron saint of love and romance. So that's really, it's some of these people in the poetry and that who really popularized it and made it the kind of a thing that we're familiar with today. Shakespeare also in a couple of his plays mentions St. Valentine's Day. So you have in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Theseus, the character there, says, "Good morrow, friends. St. Valentine is past," meaning St. Valentine's Day is past. "Begin these wood birds but to couple now." So he's kind of referring in this to the fact that the couple involved are a bit, that they're kind of a bit late about getting together and falling in love and that kind of thing. So they're a little bit late to the game. So he says, "Oh, Valentine's Day is already past, and are these two wood birds just coupling now?" That kind of thing. So, but again, it shows you that in the kind of imagination, St. Valentine and St. Valentine's Day is very much associated with love and romance. And again, Shakespeare, you've Ophelia there, and that picture. Well, she doesn't. Well, you know the whole story. She doesn't look terribly happy in this picture. But anyway, Ophelia in Hamlet refers to St. Valentine's Day as well. And so tomorrow is St. Valentine's Day. All in the morning betime, and I am made at your window to be your Valentine. So again, why am I saying all this? I'm saying this because we're talking about who is St. Valentine. We're talking about why is he associated with love. And we're saying that he's associated with love because what he did in his lifetime, as I say, by supporting couples who were in love and who wanted to get married. So there's that's why he's associated with love. But also he's associated with love because of poetry and literature, and obviously then there must have been, you know, some kind of more popular following for him as well. So that's the reason why his name, St. Valentine's name, kind of lasted through the centuries and was all the time being associated with love, and it all confirmed him, as you like, in people's imaginations as the patron saint of love. So that's one thing. And he's also, interestingly, St. Valentine, he was also known during his lifetime as a healer. So people went to for healing and that. And you get quite a bit of that in the centuries after Valentine's dies. You get a lot of people praying to him in terms of, love, you know, send me the true love of my life, all that kind of thing. So there is that. There's people praying to Valentine for love, and that's probably the main thing. But also, because he was known as a healer during his life, quite a lot of people prayed to him for healing. And actually, even here in Whitefriar Street nowadays, we find that's one of the things that people often are doing when they come here and are praying to St. Valentine. They're praying for healing, oftentimes healing of a partner or a situation if your partner's unwell or that. So often the kind of love and romance is linked with healing that way for people when they come here. I often find that, and in the prayers that people ask us to say, the Carmelites here for them, it's often, you know, would you pray to St. Valentine, you know, my wife or my husband or my partner's unwell, you know, so there's a kind of the love and romance, but you know, does the healing aspect too. So, and there is a legend, for example, it's quite a late story about St. Valentine that, you know, he befriended his jailer while he was, you know, in jail before his execution. His jailer had a blind daughter, and because Valentine was an educated man and could read, and that seemingly he used to get Valentine to read stories to him and his daughter. His daughter, as I say, was blind, so and he'd sort of tell stories about the world and kind of appeal to her imagination. And supposedly the night, according to this legend, the night before he died, before he was executed, he wrote to the blind girl, and he signed a letter from your Valentine. And some people think, I think this is really pushing it a bit much, but some people think that's actually the origin of, you know, what people write on Valentine's cards, you know, when they say from your Valentine. In this case, it was Valentine himself writing to the little girl saying, from your Valentine, from your friend Valentine. And according to the legend, she was cured of her blindness right then and there on the day that Valentine died. But it's interesting that little story. As I say, some people say that's the origins of writing from your, I know we tend to write be my Valentine or from your Valentine or something like that nowadays in a Valentine Day card, but some people, you know, say this is the origins of that. It's possible, but because it's quite a late story though. We don't know whether it really happened, but it's a nice story. Interesting, I just mentioned here that I found recently in recent years an awful lot of stuff, particularly among doctors and medical people, who got very interested in the fact that Valentine was the kind of patron saint of epilepsy, and a lot of people suffering from epilepsy used to pray to him, and even they used to make little hats, little caps, which were supposed to help people with epilepsy that would have Valentine's image on it, which is interesting. So again, what I'm saying here is that Valentine, you know, he's this real person, if you like. During his life, he encouraged couples who were in love in the face of the cruel emperor. So he's the patron saint of love. That gets continued all through the centuries. He's mentioned in poetry and plays and the rest of it. People are praying to him in the meantime for love and romance, but also the healing aspect of St. Valentine is something that continues a lot into the future. So again, as I say, I'm very happy to take questions at the end, so if you have any thoughts on these things, I'd be happy to hear them then. So we'll just go on then a little bit. So I want to talk now about Father John Spratt. You may or may not have heard of, I don't know. There was a book, it's not a light read, a book came out about him, a biography, about 2 years ago. It's about 700 pages long. There's a lot has come out about him, but he's a very, very interesting character. He's the guy who brought the relics of St. Valentine to Whitefriar Street Church. So that's what we wanted to look at. So just to say something about him, he's an extraordinary man. He was around, you know, from most of the 19th century. He died in 1871. And he seemed to know everybody. Like he was a huge friend of Daniel O'Connell, for example, was involved in both the Catholic emancipation with Daniel O'Connell, but also the repeal movement for repealing the Act of Union, all that kind of thing. He was very involved. But he's actually, Spratt, he's absolutely everywhere. There seems to be nowhere that he wasn't. I mean, I even found in a history of Dublin Zoo, he was mentioned, you know. So he seems to have got everywhere. And it's him who brought the relics of St. Valentine here to this church, and why we have them in Dublin City today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him and how the relics came here. So Spratt was born in 1796 on Cork Street here in the Liberties. He was baptized in St. Catherine's Church on Mead Street, went to school in Dolphin's Barn. And in 1816, he enters the Carmelite order. Now, because of history, the Carmelites were at Whitefriar Street originally back in the 1200s, okay? But then obviously in the mid-1500s, you'd Henry VIII and all that. And so all places like ourselves were closed down and the lands sold off to somebody else. So we basically in the mid-1500s, Whitefriar Street ceased to exist. So, and the order went down to, there was almost only one Carmelite left in Ireland at one point. So there wasn't a lot of the order in Ireland. So Spratt had to go and get his education in Spain, which he did, being at school in Dolphin's Barn and all the rest of it. So he comes back then from Spain, and he sets up a Carmelite community on French Street, which is now Upper Mercer Street, and also a church. They opened a small church, the Carmelites, on Cuff Lane, just near Cuff Street there, if anybody of you know it. But in 1822, he acquires a site at Whitefriar Street. Basically, it was part of the original land where Whitefriar Street was originally, before Henry VIII took it off the Carmelites. And basically, he bought 2 houses on Ainger Street and built the church, the current church that we have, that some of you may know. He built a church in the back garden, effectively, of the 2 houses on Ainger Street. And the architect that he got to do this was a fellow called George Papworth. And he was the same architect as who designed Dublin's Pro Cathedral. as well, if any of you are familiar with that. That's kind of what the church looked at the time in the 1820s, the church as Spratt had it built. That's what it looked like. That's an engraving that we have. That's what it looked like on the inside. Okay, and it's interesting. In some ways, if any of you know the church, and I'll show you some pictures later, when you look at the front of the church on Angel Street now, or you even just look at it, it doesn't look very like that, or even inside it certainly doesn't look like that, because it was expanded and reconstructed many, many times. Particularly the last time there was a huge job done in the 1950s, where it was radically changed. But actually, if you look at, that's just a picture I took the other day. That's the side of Whitefriar Street Church on Whitefriar Place. So you've Angel Street there is up ahead of you there. You can see the Swan Lynch's pub there in yellow. So that's actually the side of Whitefriar Street now. And you can actually see how it is the same church, just about. The side is pretty much similar, even though lots of it has changed. So this is the church that Spratt had built, and it was the Carmelites coming back to where they'd been before at Whitefriar Street. Okay, so now we're getting to the relics of Valentine. So he visits Rome in 1835. Spratt does. And he was a very, very gifted preacher in his time, so he was a very, very good public speaker. So he was engaged to speak at the main Jesuit church in Rome, which is called the Jesu. If you're familiar with Gardiner Street in Dublin, the church, the Jesuit church, it's very much based in the way it looks on the Jesu in Rome. And that's where Spratt preached. But he also probably was in Rome to advise the Pope a little bit on the situation in Britain and Ireland. So there is a bit of a political dimension to this, definitely. And I'll say a little bit more in a moment. I think there's a definite political dimension to the relics of St Valentine coming to Whitefriar Street, put it that way. So what had happened was that the Pope, obviously was very interested to hear about Spratt. Spratt, as I say, was offering advice on the situation in Ireland and England at the time. And he also, was well got as a preacher. And so the Pope wanted to give him a gift, particularly as he knew that Spratt had just built a new church in Dublin in 1827, Whitefriar Street Church. And one thing that with a new church is the Pope considered, it would be a good thing to establish a kind of a link between this new church and the old church and the earliest Christians, and link this new church in Dublin with Rome and all that kind of thing. And one way of doing this was to give relics to the church. And they had recently discovered, because there were a lot of excavations going on in Rome itself, they had recently discovered the relics of St. Valentine, or they had been rediscovered. And so Pope Gregory XVI, who was the Pope, gifted these to Spratt to bring back to his church in Dublin. And that would establish a link, as it were, between this new church in Dublin and the ancient church in Rome, and a link back to one of the older saints, namely St. Valentine. So it takes a few months to kind of arrange to bring them to Whitefriar Street, but in 1836 they came on the 10th of November. The relics arrive in Dublin, and it's fairly well, it's a sort of a public event at the time. The Archbishop of Dublin, Archbishop Murray, celebrated the Mass, and so the relics were installed here, brought here at Whitefriar Street Church. So that's how the relics of St. Valentine came here. Now, just to say something further about Valentine, or about John Spratt, again, who brought them here, just some of his interests. He was involved in the Repeal Association. He headed up the Committee for Famine Relief, particularly in this area. He took up the cause for tenant farmers. He set up homeless shelters and numerous schools. He was a temperance campaigner. All the time, one of the emphasis was he worked with all the other Christian denominations. It wasn't just a kind of a Catholic Church thing for him, and he always insisted on that. And even like when he died, some of the people who paid most tribute to him were people of other Christian denominations. When he died in 1871, Spratt, as I say, who brings the relics of St Valentine to Whitefriar Street, when Spratt died, there were 30,000 people accompanied his funeral cortege to Glasnevin Cemetery. He's buried there in Glasnevin Cemetery, very near to Daniel O'Connell. And I just sort of want to say, I've said some of this, you know, why did Gregory gift the relics of St. Valentine to Spratt, you know, in 1835? And so I think it was, as I said, as a mark of his esteem, you know, and in recognition of the good work that he was doing. So I think there was that. The Pope wanted to give him some sort of a gift to acknowledge that. As I say, Spratt definitely, he met with this guy in Rome, Cardinal Weld, and Cardinal Weld was Pope Gregory XVI's main advisor on affairs in Britain and Ireland. And definitely because, you know, Spratt was, you know, friend of Daniel O'Connell, involved in all these different causes that I mentioned, he would undoubtedly have been, in going to Rome, it was for religious reasons, but I think there was also diplomatic, political reasons too. We don't have the details of the documents about that, but I don't think we're too far off the mark there. And as I say, Spratt had built this new church of Whitefriar Street at the time, and the Pope giving St. Valentine's relics established a connection between the people of Dublin and the Pope and Rome and all that kind of thing. And also, it would have to be said that, you know, the church was built, you know, was finished in 1827. Catholic emancipation only comes in, you know, the end of the penal laws and that in 1829. And then Spratt is in Rome in 1835. It's all the same time. And so the Pope's gesture of giving the relics of St. Valentine to Whitefriar Street Church was a way of Rome, I think, giving support to Catholics in Ireland who were just recovering from the penal laws. So I would definitely say, without overemphasizing it, you know, there's a religious aspect to Valentine, but there's also, I would think, given the history of Ireland and all that was going on at the time, there's a kind of a political dimension to it too. If you look at what was going on at the time, that the relics was a way of the Pope supporting the people of Dublin and Catholics in Ireland, I think is definitely part of the story. Okay, so we can see that as we go ahead. Now, why am I? Oh yeah. So just to show you what we have in terms of the relics, what they look like. And I'm keeping an eye on time. I'll go on another 5 minutes or so, and then allow time for questions. We're a little late starting, but anyway. So this is what we have in terms of the box that contains the relics. And it's in the shrine. I'll show you some photographs in a moment here at Whitefriar Street. The brass plates on top, well, they actually say this shrine contains the sacred body of, you can't see it there, it's in red, of St. Valentine. You'll see it in some other pictures I have. The martyr, together with a small vessel tinged with his blood. And so that's what was what's stated in the documentation, the letters that came from Rome to Whitefriar Street with the relics state that this is what it is, that it contains the body of St. Valentine, most likely bones, and this small vessel tinged with his blood. So that's what we're told is inside. We've never opened this. It was all sealed. It's sealed within sealed, and we haven't ever opened it up. So we're taking it on trust that that's what's there. And those brass plates that are on top there on either side, they're actually a copy of the letter, of the document that came from Rome, you know, authenticating these as the relics of St. Valentine and saying what they are. Okay, so that's that. You'll see more of that as we go on. So you can just see there, that's just the letter that I was talking about that's in the brass plates. You can see, I'm not going to read it all. It talks about Father Spratt, and it talks about that the Pope has ordered that these relics be given to Spratt for his use in his church, and that it contains the remains of Valentine together with a small vessel tinged with his blood. just deposited in a wooden case covered with painted paper, and that's all enclosed within this overall huge, very, very heavy, I have to say, metal box. Okay, so so that's what you see on the actual box there. There's a St. Valentine's Day where someone has put a rose on the shrine box itself. Okay, so that's what we have. That's just to say something then of, and from now for most of the rest of the talk, just going to show you some images, and that will, then you can come in with your own questions and reflections. Just sort of Whitefriar Street Church, that's what the front looks like today. Many of you may be familiar with it. It's on Aungier Street, and that's just some of the images. That's what the overall church looks like. And the Valentine shrine is in there to the right hand side, and that's just again looking at part of the church. Yeah, it's interesting. I want to make a point here that we said that the relics of St. Valentine came to Whitefriar Street Church in 1836, and there was a big hoo-ha and ceremony about it, and the Archbishop saying Mass and all the rest of it, but it was kind of quickly forgotten about. So the relics were brought to the church, but there was no permanent shrine of St. Valentine, so they were actually put away in the basement. And it has to be said, after about 3 years, from about 1839 right up until the 1950s, they were sort of forgotten about and left in the basement here in Whitefriar Street. There wasn't, for all that period, there wasn't that much interest. And even we find in 1846 in a publication called the Dublin Evening Packet and Correspondent on the 3rd of December 1846. This is 10 years after the relics of Valentine had been brought to the church. Someone writing a bit sarcastically, I think, said, "Whatever has happened to the bones of St. Valentine, about which there was such a fuss a few years ago?" Okay, so there was that. So it wasn't until the major reconstruction and remodeling of the church in the 1950s that St. Valentine was given his own shrine in the main church. And this is the shrine we see today. You can see that's the statue there. That's the altar under the statue. Okay, that's the box I was telling you about with the letter reproduced in brass plates on top. Okay, it's toughened glass, there's alarms and everything on it, I tell you, it should take someone pretty mighty to move it. It's a very, very heavy box. So that's where the relics are contained. Again, that's the image we looked at. There's a view of the shrine. So again, that shrine was built in the 1950s. I'm saying that after the relics were brought to the church in 1836, they were kind of forgotten about and put away in a basement until the 1950s. And it's really since the 50s that we have a proper shrine for Valentine and the relics in the altar underneath for people to see. So that's the statue of Valentine. And I just want to mention in relation to the statue of Valentine that it was done by the leading Irish sculptor Irene Broe, who had a studio on nearby York Street. So in the 1950s, she did this statue for Valentine's Shrine, you see. That was her work, Irene Broe. And Irene Broe, the more I read about her, she's absolutely fascinating. Huge friend of Brendan Behan, Patrick Kavanagh, and she was part of a whole group of literary people who used to meet in a basement of a Georgian house on Fitzwilliam Street. And where they used to meet, they called it the catacombs, which is kind of funny in a way, given that she ended up then doing a statue of St. Valentine, who came from the catacombs. So I like that little play on words. Some of Irene Broe's finest work is on display in the National Gallery. She was really a top sculptor. So she did that statue that in the 1950s for the shrine, where we finally gave the remains of St. Valentine a decent home. So I'm just going to end with these 2 minutes, some pictures of St. Valentine's Day at Whitefriar Street, a typical St. Valentine's Day. In other words, pre-COVID, it has to be said. Loads and loads of candles, really, really crowds of people coming to the church. locals, people from outside Dublin, people praying, searching, and in love, engaged couples, oftentimes getting their rings blessed, but lots and lots of tourists as well. And pre-COVID days, we had to put in a whole queuing system here in the church on Valentine's Day and in the days leading up to it in recent years. We were absolutely jam-packed with visitors. So that's the kind of thing, the loads and loads of candles lit. People would write, you see, that's the altar with the shrine box and all the rest of it, and people would write their prayers on these little cards, which we made available for free to people, and they could place them on the altar. People place plenty of flowers around the place. There's a book, I have it blurred there because we try to keep people's petitions reasonably private, but there's lots of people write their prayers, their petitions in there. They might be praying for love, they might be praying to meet somebody. Sometimes people are praying for their relationship going through a rocky period, for help. Sometimes people are praying for a sick child, or sometimes people are praying for other people that they may find love, or for their relationships, that kind of thing. That all happens. So they write it in the book or in the cards on the shrine. Again, there's some of the people coming on St Valentine's Day. There's some of the couples, engaged couples who come to the shrine there. Sometimes that was a visiting bishop who had arranged to bless rings and that kind of thing. So we often hear back from people who come here. Sometimes we don't know who's been here until we hear back. I mean, one of my favorite stories recently was a New York police officer from the NYPD, and she came here and she prayed for love, and within 2 months she met the love of her life, who she got married to, and she wrote back to us to tell us about it. And we get many stories about that, but we also get many other sometimes heart-aching stories, and we try to include everybody in this, and we try to ask Valentine's help for people. And so that's it. I'll shut up because I've wittered on enough, and so I'm really wishing happy St. Valentine's Day to everybody, and I'm very happy to chat with you or take questions now. I hope it's given you some flavour of Valentine and Whitefriar Street Church. So thanks very much, everybody, for being patient to listen to me all that time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Father Simon. That was really interesting just to get the background. I suppose it's a place that, for those of us maybe living in Dublin and who are in the city centre, that we pass regularly. Certainly it's on my bus route into town, and I wasn't aware of the background. I knew St Valentine, part of him was there, but I really didn't know the rest of it. So thank you very much. That was fascinating. And if anybody does have any questions for Father Simon, we have some time. We're getting some feedback there. Simon, you can probably see the chat room anyway.
Hopefully, I'll just come out of sharing that, and hopefully I'm able to, right, where are we? Chat, okay. Right, thank you. Right, you have a bit of feedback there. Okay, if anyone has any questions or anything, go ahead.
Don't forget you are all on mute, so just unmute yourself if you want to join in with a question. Or Annie has a question. Sorry, Annie, thank you very much. Yeah, you're very interesting. Thank you, Father Simon. And what a great man Father Spratt was.
Yeah, he was a fascinating character. He was really larger than life. It's just, I'm just amazed that 30,000 people were at his funeral. He was just involved in everything. And even when, as I say, I wasn't surprised when I was totally unrelated reading a history of the zoo, and there he was mentioned. He was involved in that too.
And I was interested, you said that he was actually from the area, more or less, that he grew up in Rialto. And
yes, he did, very much so. So he was very much a man of the area, and he went off to his studies in Spain, but when he came back, he remained very, very rooted in the area. Here was where he was all the time, and he was involved in, particularly a lot of the social issues at the time, majorly. So
he was a man very much kind of, I suppose, ahead of his time then, really.
Yeah, in many ways. He was a I've no doubt he was a holy man and all that, and did his thing. But he was a real doer. He was a real practical man, and he was well connected. I think he was quite a charismatic figure. I think he had a kind of a gift for friendship, and that he obviously, and I mean, it's quite amazing at the time. Catholics and other denominations didn't get on very well in those days, and yet he seemed to transcend all that. And some of the people who were most vocal about him, praising him, even when he died, were people from other churches, and he just didn't. And he insisted again and again that in all these things, whether it was with the famine or whether it was the Act of Union or whatever political cause, but it was mostly social that he was involved in. Homelessness, food centres, all the different things, that they were not in any way to be sectarian. He insisted on everybody cooperating this way, so it's great. Yeah.
Just one thing that it just struck me when you were saying that when Whitefriar Street Church was built, that it was built just before Catholic emancipation came through.
Yeah.
So there was a law, I think, if I'm correct, that there was nobody, you weren't allowed to have a place of worship facing onto the street.
Right.
So would there have been buildings in front of it, or was what is now the front of it, was that maybe?
You see, what happens is, it's really funny because this is Whitefriar Street Church, okay? Whitefriar Street is actually the lane out the back.
Okay.
And originally the entrance to the church was on that lane, so it was actually on Whitefriar Street, but it's actually now just a lane out the back. If you blink, you'd miss it. That's Whitefriar Street. The church is actually on Ainger Street, and that's actually funny because they've two different postcodes. Whitefriar Street is Dublin 8, Ainger Street is Dublin 2, and my phone is funny because my phone always tells me if I move between different parts of Dublin. So when I wake up in the morning, it tells me I'm in Dublin 2, and then when I go down to the church, it tells me I'm at work in Dublin 8. And that's only happens just by going from my room down to the church. So yeah, it's kind of funny that like a number of like Clarendon Street, that's the other Carmelite church in Dublin. Again, it's kind of okay. It's so near Grafton Street, but it's actually off the street in many ways. And the Pro Cathedral, the same. It's kind of it's off O'Connell Street. And then similarly here, it was built at a time. So it was built, as I say, what would have been on Ainger Street was two Georgian houses. And effectively they built the house in the back garden with the entrance on the lane at the back, which was Whitefriar Street,
Lily, can I come in?
Yes, Geraldine.
Although I'm living in Monaghan, I'm actually a Dubliner in disguise. My grandparents lived in Little Longford Street. My grandfather, they would have died in the 1960s, and they were both in their 90s at that stage. But my grandfather was the foreman for Pym's Horses, and that, and they were the Salvation Army is now. Was the horses, and then later on after that it was a garage.
Oh, it's not very interesting.
Trucks. So we would have gone to Whitefriar Street, when we were down visiting Grand and Grandad, we would have gone over to Whitefriar Street, over to church there. And seen it,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because Longford is the name, like even the little lane there just at the side of this Longford Lane. And
that's right.
Lots of Longford is in a lot of the names around here. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, there was a pub there. It's gone now, but it rejoiced in the name of Rattigans and Loonies when I was a child. But that was
yeah. But is that the one just on the corner opposite the Sally Army? That's been opened again as the Thomas More or something. Well, it's not open at the moment, but it's been that was done up there recently. Yeah, I think they're calling it the Thomas More pub because that's the Thomas More, the great writer of songs, lived there. So that's I think what that is now. Yeah, that's very interesting to hear. Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay.
It's you never know when you start a conversation like this. You never know where you're going to end up and who's going to be connected in some way. So
that's it. Yeah.
It's part of our Irishness, I think, isn't it? We're a small island. Yes, Annette, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was talking to Father Simon previously and saying, can you imagine in this day with social media and you know, television and international news, what sort of a character John Spratt would have been in this day and age. You know, he would have been worldwide figure, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely, definitely. I think, you know, I think he'd probably been involved in one of the organizations, or, you know, he definitely had, well, he'd been presumably be a priest or whatever, but I think he'd have been involved in all kinds of things. Yeah, he might have been. I mean, I don't say that Peter McVerry of the day, I wouldn't, because Peter McVerry is a very high standard to live up to. But he was involved in a lot of the things that Father Peter McVerry is involved in. In fact, when you think of it, a lot of the things that Father Spratt was involved in are the things that are still with us. Some of the difficult things, like even you know, violence and homelessness and well, poverty in general, but also you know, providing food centres and all these things. They're all still very, very much needs of our own time. So he was, and there were others as well at the time. But I think he was a kind of something of a McVerry character. He used, as I said, he had a great gift he was very charismatic, had a great gift for friendship, and I think he used those connections for friendships very well to, you know, achieve the kind of ends that he wanted to, you know. So, but he was certainly larger than life, you know, and it's interesting.
So as Prior of Whitefriar Street, you have a lot to live up to.
I know. I tell you know, he was some man, but no, it's wonderful actually. It's good that, as I say, there is a lot more about him coming out more and more as the years go by, which is great. You know, that his stories told, you know. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the clock, and I don't want. Okay. Oh, sorry, we have a question here. Is there a special mass or service on Sunday next? I presume you're, well, obviously the church is.
Well, I tell you,
closed,
normally,
are you online?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you actually. There's a couple of things. We are online. We normally do a sort of a special thing for Valentine's. We're not this year because we can't have congregations. So we're just having. It's really Sunday mass now. As it happens, the 10:30 mass on Sunday morning, this coming Sunday morning, I'm celebrating it, and it'll be very much. I'll be talking about St Valentine, and that will be it'll be a Valentine's Day mass. It's going to be rebroadcast, I think, at 2:15 on RTE News Now. You know, the RTE News Now channel. They're going to rebroadcast the mass from here. I think so it'll be recorded. But if anyone wants to watch it live, they can watch it on the Whitefriar Street website, which is whitefriarstreetchurch.ie. The 10:30 mass on Sunday, and then, as I say, that will be replayed at 2:15 on Sunday on the RTE News Now channel, which a lot of people can get on their tellies. Ireland AM were in yesterday. They're doing a little piece on I think on Thursday morning, if anyone watches that. So there'll be a little bit. They did an interview with me for Ireland AM. That's coming out on Thursday morning. But you've heard most of what I have to say. But if you're interested in joining in the mass and joining in the prayers, and we will be remembering everybody, if you're interested in joining in with us. And by the way, you can send in your prayers, anyone who wants to, or petitions, or anything, whatever you want, you can send it in on our website. It's absolutely possible. And there's even what we have a light a candle feature on the website, where we'll actually light candles for people, and you can do that for Valentine if anyone wants to. You know, so you can join in with us as best we can in these days. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Father Simon, for your time this morning. And as you can see from the comments that we've had back, lots of people really appreciated it. And best of luck to you. And indeed, when I was talking to Father Simon earlier, we were just saying that obviously, do you want to tell them about your, you were in Whitefriar Street many years ago. You said when you joined there, you were the youngest member of the community.
Oh, I know. I don't know how I seem to be age defying or something. Yeah, I was the youngest member of the community. I lived here 20 years ago. And I came back here just 3 years ago, and I'm still the youngest. So I don't know how I managed that. I'm age defying, but anyway, yeah. But we're act as 10 of us here. Yeah,
Well, best of luck to all of you, and hope you all stay safe and keep well.
Yeah.
And thank you very much again for this.
That was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. I really enjoyed that.
Take good care and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye, Annette. Bye, Billy.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I'll end the meeting
very
for
much.
everybody now. So thank you for joining in, and we'll be back next Wednesday morning, same time, 10:30. And if you're interested in joining the film club on Friday, I know Annie sent a message, that's at 2:45 on Friday afternoon, where we're showing, Annette, I keep forgetting the name of the film, it's called
Young at Heart.
Young at Heart. So Frank Sinatra and Doris Day, Friday afternoon, a Valentine's special again. So, okay.
Young.
Thank you all. Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.